My name is Wren. I'm a doctor, a daughter, a quiet constant in a family that only noticed absence when it interrupted their image. Last Christmas, I stood at the farmhouse sink, scrubbing cranberry sauce off porcelain while they laughed by the fire in matching sweaters. This year, I was halfway through rolling out dough for my pecan tart, my signature, when the call came. It's probably best if you don't come this year. 10 words, delivered with a gentleness more cruel than any outburst. Nathan said it like a weather report. Camille's name came up. My energy was deemed too heavy. They didn't even flinch when they cut me out of the picture. Not with a scream, not with a scandal, just an edit. But silence doesn't mean consent, and presence doesn't require permission. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I opened my laptop, canceled the mortgage buffer, the therapy copay, the monthly deposits no one thanked me for. Then I opened a spreadsheet. What they forgot. Line by line, year by year. Quiet sacrifices dressed as normalcy. And then I found the letter. His letter. From the only one who ever saw me without needing to be told. Grandpa Thomas. Winter Haven belongs to you. Not just a cabin. Not just a deed. But a recognition of who I was. And who they refused to see. I didn't plan revenge. I reclaimed reality. So when Camille found the letter, posted it, and let the world see what I was never allowed to say. The story cracked open, and they came running, with apologies dipped in performance, with requests masked as concern, with fear disguised as reconciliation. But I didn't open the door for closure. I closed it for clarity. Because sometimes the most radical revenge is refusing to return. Have you ever been erased by the people you thought would protect you? Tell me in the comments, or simply sit with this story if that's all you can do today. And if you believe in quiet justice, in dignity without performance, like, subscribe, because your worth should never depend on who shows up for dinner. The words hung in the room longer than Nathan intended. They traveled through the tiny speaker of her phone and into the cold walls of her Boston apartment, settling somewhere behind her sternum like a slow-forming bruise. Ivy stood in the half-lit kitchen, hands motionless over a roll of parchment paper she was about to use for the pecan tart. Her signature Christmas dessert. The dough, carefully chilled since last night, waited on the counter. The oven was already humming low heat. She didn't speak right away. There was no point. Nathan's tone had been casual, almost reluctant, as if reading a line someone else had written for him. But the phrasing, it wasn't vague. It was surgical. Camille just thinks your energy might feel a little heavy right now, Nathan added, almost apologetic. It's been a hard year for everyone, you know. Ivy breathed out, slow and barely audible, pressing the edge of her nail into the countertop to remind herself she was still here. Last year, she had stood in that same kitchen, except it wasn't hers. It was the big farmhouse kitchen in New Hampshire, where her family still lived. She remembered scrubbing cranberry sauce off a porcelain dish as laughter echoed from the living room. They'd all been gathered by the fireplace in matching sweaters, clinking glasses and posing for photos. Camille had made a toast. Nathan had handed out gag gifts. No one had noticed when Ivy excused herself to clean. No one had thanked her for the handmade gifts she'd brought. Not even a nod from Nathan. Camille had barely glanced her way. Right, Ivy said now, softly. The line went quiet before Nathan added, "We'll call you on Christmas morning, just to check in." And then the call ended. Ivy placed the phone down slowly, like it was made of glass. She stared at it for a few seconds, then turned her head to the living room. The artificial tree stood unlit in the corner, still undecorated. A single strand of lights hung limp across one side, never plugged in. She walked back to the counter, picked up the tart crust, and set it gently in the trash. The parchment paper followed. Then the phone rang again. She didn't need to check the screen to know. Ivy? Her mother's voice, as warm and measured as always. "Hi, Mom." A beat. "I wanted to make sure Nathan told you." "He did." Another pause, longer this time. It's just, things have been tense lately, and we don't want Camille to feel. If I come, you won't open the door, Ivy said, cutting in. Not a question, just clarification. Susan sighed. It's not personal, sweetheart. It's just about keeping the peace. Ivy felt the chill from the kitchen tiles seeping through her socks. I understand, she said, and she did. Susan hesitated. We'll be thinking of you, I'm sure. The call ended. She didn't cry, didn't throw anything. Her hands remained steady as she opened her laptop and navigated to the familiar banking interface. She tapped a few keys, opened her saved logins, and clicked through until the dashboard loaded. First, the standing transfer to cover the Wren family mortgages buffer, $1,200 monthly. She paused for a breath, then canceled it. Second, the freelance development fund she sent Nathan each month so he wouldn't have to drive for Uber every night. Gone. Third, her mother's weekly therapy copay. Click, click, canceled. Her fingers moved like a surgeon's, controlled, deliberate, almost gentle. This wasn't rage. Rage would have felt hotter. This was something else. Something colder. She closed the banking tab and opened a blank spreadsheet. A soft, blinking cursor waited in the top left cell. She typed the header, "What they forgot," and then sat there for a moment just looking at it. The tree in the corner still blinked faintly, only one bulb flickering, unlit and disconnected. They didn't erase me because I failed them. They erased me because I reminded them of who they really were. The words lived first in Ivy's mind, then silently settled into the chilled room around her. She hadn't said them aloud. She didn't need to. The laptop screen lit her face in the dimness of the apartment, the only other source of light coming from a lone candle flickering beside it. Beeswax, slow burning, gifted by a patient last year who'd said, "You have quiet hands, Doc." Outside the window, snow drifted lazily against the Boston skyline, muffling the world like a memory half swallowed by time. She leaned forward, fingers hovering over the keyboard, cursor blinking beneath the bolded spreadsheet title, "What They Forgot." Below it, row by row, were quiet betrayals disguised as generosity. Years of transactions that had once felt like love. Now they glared back at her like surveillance footage. 2018, Nathan's emergency dental work, $3,400, paid in full. 2019, Susan's missed insurance premium, $2,100, covered quietly without request. 2020, furnace replacement at the New Hampshire house, $5,850, co-signed, never reimbursed. 2021, Camille's grandmother's overnight ICU transfer. Ivy stayed 16 hours, even though her own shift had ended. Line after line, item after item. She didn't list them with malice, only clarity, like someone counting debris after a storm. She paused, adjusting the laptop screen away from the candle's heat. Her eyes drifted to the shoebox on the shelf, the one labeled Old Letters. She hadn't opened it in years. Inside, beneath cards and crumpled receipts, lay a photo. Her and Grandpa Thomas standing in front of Winter Haven, the family's old log cabin in Vermont. She must have been 15 then, cheeks flushed from the cold, wool scarf too big for her neck. He'd wrapped an arm around her and said something she didn't remember. But his eyes were kind, full of belief. Behind the photo, folded crisply, was a note in his handwriting. She didn't need to read the envelope to know it was for her. She unfolded it slowly. Winter Haven belongs to you. You see what others miss. Not just the cracks in the wood, but the soul beneath it. Love fiercely even when they don't return it. You are my legacy. Her hand trembled just slightly, then steadied. She laid the letter next to the spreadsheet, side by side on the kitchen table. It wasn't for them. It was for her. She opened the drawer, pulled out the simple black frame she'd meant to use for a diploma she never hung, slid the photo of her and Grandpa inside, sealed the back. It was Christmas Eve. She lit a second candle, then opened her draft folder on the laptop. A message stared back at her. Hope you're warm tonight. Love you anyway. Camille's name hovered in the recipient field. Ivy watched it for a long time. Then hit delete. The screen flashed, and it was gone. She closed the laptop, stood still, let the silence sit beside her like a trusted friend. Somewhere, snow kept falling, and hundreds of miles away, in the Wren family's Colorado home, Camille walked past a crooked picture frame in the hallway. Something made her stop. She tilted her head. "That's her," she whispered. "That's Dr. Ivy. She saved my grandmother's life. And you didn't even save her a seat." The words fell into the dining room like glass shattering on polished wood. Conversation died mid-sip. Forks paused mid-air. Only the soft clink of a spoon dropping against a porcelain saucer followed. Camille stood at the far end of the Wren estate's grand dining table, her tone low but clear, slicing through the hum of curated perfection. The crystal glasses, the gilded chargers, the rosemary-dusted roast resting like a centerpiece in a magazine spread. Behind her, one chair remained conspicuously empty. It hadn't even been pulled out. Nathan coughed lightly into his napkin. Susan shot him a warning glance, then smoothed the lace of her sleeve. Charles blinked slowly, still chewing, as though unsure whether he'd misheard his daughter or the universe itself. Camille didn't sit back down. Just half an hour ago, she had wandered from the table, drawn by a photograph hung slightly askew in the hallway. A girl in a thick scarf, cheeks pink, standing in front of a wooden cabin beside an older man with smiling eyes. Camille had stared at it, heart thudding. She knew that face. Dr. Ivy. The one who had held her grandmother's hand and whispered stories when machines hissed and no one else stayed. Curiosity had pulled her down the hallway, into Ivy's old bedroom, preserved like a museum piece in beige and ivory. Dust shimmered in the afternoon light. Under the bed, in a shallow wooden box, Camille found a bundle of papers. High school awards, a stethoscope still curled in its case, and a folded letter. The handwriting was trembling but deliberate. She read it once, then again. Now she held it in her hand like a verdict. "She wasn't just your daughter," Camille said, eyes locked on Susan. "She was the glue in this house, and you discarded her." Susan forced a breathy laugh. "Oh, Camille, honey, that letter was from an old man. Your grandfather was sweet, but that paper isn't legal. Ivy knows that." "She never asked for anything legal," Camille snapped. "But I'm making it visible." She lifted her phone, snapped a crisp photo of the letter held against the family's mantel. A few taps, then her voice again. Even, deliberate. Caption: "This is what erasure looks like. She's not invisible anymore." Susan's lips thinned. "You have no idea what she's like. She always needed attention." "No," Camille cut in. "She needed space, and you never made any. You just took—" The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. In the corner, Charles finally looked up, his knife stilled against the plate. He looked older than he had 10 minutes ago. Nathan pushed his wine glass aside. His phone had begun to buzz. 1 ping. 2. 6. Camille's phone lit up too. Then again. And again. Susan's face blanched as the room filled with an eerie digital chorus. Notifications poured in. Ivy Wren was trending. Camille's post, screenshot of the letter tagged with Wren family members, was being shared across accounts like a spark in dry grass. Nathan's gallery's Instagram page, which had scheduled a post for a New Year's collection, quietly vanished. Charles's law firm profile was bombarded with questions about disinheriting medical heroes. Susan's charity board, DMS, overflowed. Still standing, Camille didn't gloat. She just looked tired. Somewhere, far away in a small apartment in Boston, Ivy's phone buzzed against the counter. "You've been tagged in a post." She didn't reach for it, didn't even glance down. Instead, she stirred her tea once, then lifted the cup to her lips. Steam rose, soft and fragrant. She took a slow sip and turned toward the window. Outside, snow continued its slow descent. Steady, patient, indifferent. She watched, not waiting, just being. You're not here for the truth. You're here for the optics. The words cut through the icy air between them with the precision of a scalpel. Ivy stood at the threshold of her apartment. The door opened just enough to expose her frame, shadowed by the dim hallway light. Outside, the wind howled through the alley like an animal that couldn't find its way home. Snow streaked the windows behind her, muffling the noise of Christmas night in Boston. Nathan looked like he hadn't slept. His coat was half-buttoned, collar twisted. Susan stood beside him, hair pinned but fraying at the edges, her expression composed only on the surface. Charles loomed a step behind them, jaw clenched, lips flat. His eyes scanned Ivy's face like he was reading a deposition. They hadn't called ahead. They never had. "We didn't mean harm," Susan began, her voice small. She reached out a gloved hand, then quickly tucked it back into her coat pocket when Ivy didn't move. "You know we didn't. This was just a misunderstanding. Things escalated." Nathan stepped forward. "Camille listens to you. If you just explain to her that this isn't helping anyone." "You mean it's not helping you?" Ivy said, flat. Charles exhaled sharply. "This isn't good for any of us." Ivy tilted her head. "It was never good for me." A beat of silence. "You're angry," Susan said gently, rehearsed. "That's okay. We understand. We just want to make things right." Ivy studied their faces one by one, steady and unblinking. "I spent 30 years making this family look whole," she said quietly. It never was. The hallway light flickered above them. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Ivy leaned against the doorframe, her voice gaining weight. "You forgot me in Vermont 3 winters ago. Remember that?" Susan's eyes widened. Nathan blinked. "I waited outside in the cold because dinner reservations changed. No one texted. No one noticed. I stood by the driveway until the neighbor came out and asked if I needed help. You said you thought I rode with someone else?" She paused. "I didn't." Nathan opened his mouth. Ivy cut him off. "You didn't hurt me by accident," she said. "You just counted on me staying silent." Then, without anger, without heat, she pushed the door inward and closed it. The latch clicked like punctuation. She didn't slam it. That would have implied emotion she no longer needed to spend on them. Inside, the apartment was warm, still. The tea she'd left on the table had gone lukewarm, but the scent lingered. Lemon and clove. She stood in the quiet, breathing in. 1 breath, then 2, and then a knock. Not frantic, not desperate. Just 1 knock. Ivy walked back to the door, her feet silent against the hardwood. She leaned slightly and peered through the peephole. There stood Robert Wren, her uncle, alone. He held a thick manila envelope in his gloved hands. No expression on his face. Just the cold. Just the snow. Just him. He gave it to me before he passed. Told me to protect it. And to protect you. The manila envelope sat on Ivy's kitchen table like a quiet ultimatum. No embossed logo. No threatening words. Just worn corners and a faint crease, as if it had been held too tightly for too long. Steam curled from the kettle on the stove, a soft whistle building, but neither she nor Robert moved to silence it. He sat across from her, hat removed, scarf folded neatly in his lap. His hands, though weathered and red from the cold, were steady now. Just like his gaze. "I held on to it," he said, voice low. "Longer than I should have. I thought maybe things would settle. That Charles would come around, but he never did." Ivy didn't reply. She only reached to pour the hot water into her mug, letting the scent of ginger and rooibos fill the air between them. Her fingers were sure, her movements spare. Robert watched her with something close to reverence, then nodded toward the envelope. He said if anything ever happened to him, And if the rest of them started rewriting history, I was to bring this to you. No one else. The envelope opened without resistance. Inside, a single stapled packet, thick stock paper, 3 pages. The notary seal pressed clean in the corner. 2 witness signatures. One name repeated in cursive across all pages. Thomas Everett Wren. She scanned the contents, eyes flicking line by line. No hesitation. No reaction. Winter Haven shall pass in its entirety to my granddaughter Ivy Elaine Wren for her unwavering character and unseen service to this family. She paused there, not for drama, just to breathe. Robert didn't fill the silence. He didn't offer explanation or apology. When she finished reading, Ivy folded the will with careful precision and laid it beside the handwritten letter from her grandfather, the one she'd framed the day before. 2 voices of the same man, one public, one private, and both had chosen her. Robert cleared his throat. Margaret Allen's name is at the bottom. She handled the estate before it was reassigned. She'll confirm its validity. She's not the kind to be intimidated. She shouldn't have to be, Ivy said softly. Robert exhaled. Your father said it would divide the family. That naming you would undo everything. Ivy looked up, eyes meeting his. Number he was afraid it would show what was already broken. The room held steady. He reached for his coat slowly, sensing his part was over. But before he could rise, he asked the question without weight, as if it were just a necessary footnote to all of this. Will you claim it now? Ivy didn't hesitate. I don't need to, she said. I already have. He nodded, didn't smile, just stood and made his way to the door. It closed behind him with a soft click, no draft left in his wake. Alone again, Ivy reached for her tea. The mug was warm, solid in her palm. Her phone buzzed once, then again. Camille's post still pulsed across the internet. Shares, tags, comments thick with outrage, solidarity, curiosity. Ivy didn't check them. She didn't need to. The paper beside her said everything that mattered. And none of it required validation. I thought Winter Haven was a house, but it's not. It's a way of being seen. The wind cut across the Boston Park like a ribbon of ice, slipping between coat buttons and biting at the skin beneath. Ivy didn't flinch. She sat still on the bench beneath the streetlight, the halo of gold casting long shadows across her boots, her breath trailing in clouds she didn't bother to chase. In her hands, a letter. Thick cream paper, written in tight, deliberate cursive. Camille's handwriting. She unfolded it slowly, as if it might evaporate with haste. You didn't need to fight. You were enough. Thank you for seeing her when no one else did. You saved my grandmother. And in some quiet, brutal way, I think you saved me too. This family has never deserved your stillness. But I'm grateful you never let them steal it. Ivy's fingers lingered on the last line. She folded the paper back into its envelope and placed it inside her coat pocket. Around her, the park hummed with quiet life, distant laughter, footsteps crunching snow, the hum of a bus break 3 blocks away. But for Ivy, the only sound that mattered was the beat of her own pulse, present, alive. She walked the long way home. Later that night, the hospital was almost empty. The ER buzz had dimmed to its usual post-holiday lull, and the fluorescent lights above seemed less harsh under the veil of exhaustion. Ivy stepped into room 14. No clipboard, no chart. Just her. The patient was frail, barely conscious, a woman in her 80s with thin gray hair and skin like paper. Ivy didn't introduce herself. She didn't need to. She sat in the chair beside the bed and took the woman's hand. For 15 minutes, she said nothing. Just stayed. No monitors beeped in urgency. No relatives called for updates. No accolades waited in the hall. Only presence. Only now. Back at her apartment, the air was warmer than it had been in days. The snow outside had finally begun to settle, a soft blanket that dulled the world's rough edges. Ivy walked to the corner where the artificial Christmas tree stood, still unlit, still waiting. She didn't hesitate. She knelt, took the plug, and gently pushed it into the socket. The lights flickered once, then held. Warm white glow spilled across the room. Not blinding, not staged, but enough to see clearly. Ivy reached for the 2 letters on her table. Thomas's words. Winter Haven shall pass to Ivy Wren for her unwavering character and unseen service. Camille's voice. You were enough. She framed them both, placed them side by side beneath the tree. No garland, no gifts. Just that small flame of clarity humming in silence. No one called. No one knocked. The phone stayed still. And Ivy, for the first time in years, didn't wait for it. She sat by the window with a cup of tea, legs tucked beneath her, the light from the tree painting her walls in quiet constellations. Outside, the snow kept falling, layer upon layer, soft and endless. She didn't feel forgotten. She felt free. I didn't plan on being forgotten. Not at first. Not when I was still showing up with extra folding chairs, not when I stayed late to do the dishes, not when I paid bills that weren't mine and swallowed silence that wasn't fair. For years, I thought proximity would mean permanence, that if I just kept being useful, they'd eventually see me as irreplaceable. But they didn't. They saw a safety net, a fixture, a fallback. So when they asked me not to come this year, dressed in diplomacy but heavy with rejection, something inside me didn't shatter. It just stopped bending. I didn't yell. I didn't text back paragraphs. I simply opened a spreadsheet and started writing down everything they forgot. Every copay I covered. Every emergency transfer at midnight. Every plane ticket I booked so they wouldn't have to cancel a trip. Every secret sacrifice that had become part of their comfort. Funny how people never call it generosity when it's a woman's default. And even funnier, or maybe just cruel, that the same hands I used to lift them were the ones they dismissed as too heavy to be around. But I didn't write that down. Instead, I framed a letter from the only person who ever truly saw me. My grandfather. He left me Winter Haven, not because I asked for it, but because he knew I wouldn't. Because he understood that quiet doesn't mean weak. That invisibility isn't the same as absence. Then came Camille. Unexpected. Like the spark you forgot was still buried under snow. She didn't owe me anything. And yet, there she was, recognizing what the rest of them refused to. Not because I demanded it, but because truth, once seen, can't be unseen. She called them out, posted the letter, took the silence I had lived with and made it echo. And suddenly, the ones who'd erased me wanted help cleaning up the smudged narrative they left behind. They showed up at my door with apologies wrapped in excuses, asking for discretion they never once gave in return. But I wasn't angry. I was done. Done being their buffer. Done absorbing the shame of their smallness. And when Robert handed me the official will, the one they buried, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt nothing. Because the fight had never been about land or legacy. It had been about space. The kind no one gives you until you stop asking and start claiming. So I said no. Not loudly, just clearly. I didn't respond to their messages. I didn't call the attorney. I didn't show up to explain myself at family brunch. I made tea. I lit the tree. I sat with presence, not performance. For the first time in decades, I stopped being their proof of goodness and became the author of my own piece. And that's where the story ends. Not with applause, but with autonomy. They mistook her quiet for consent, mistook her generosity for duty, mistook her distance as disinterest, never realizing it was the final act of someone who had nothing left to prove. But justice, when it comes from within, needs no jury. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, truth may arrive late, but it resonates louder than any applause when it does. No one called, no one knocked. But Ivy Wren no longer needed the door to open. She had already stepped through a better one. Because sometimes the most radical revenge is refusing to return. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. If it found you on a quiet night, or on a day when you felt like the background character in your own family. I hope it reminded you of something important. Your worth does not expire when others choose not to see it. You are not invisible because they stopped clapping. You are not unworthy because they stopped calling. Ivy didn't fight to be invited back. She didn't beg to be included. She simply stopped translating her silence into guilt and chose instead to build peace in a room of her own making. And maybe that's the lesson. That justice doesn't always need a courtroom. That love doesn't always wear the face of family. That freedom sometimes is just the quiet courage to not go back. So if this story touched something in you, let me know in the comments. Or just drop a "if you're not ready to speak yet." Subscribe if you believe in stories where quiet strength wins. Share if you know someone who's ever been erased and needs to remember that they are enough. And to those of you listening from the shadows, the ones who always stay late, give more, ask less, this one was for you. From one quiet heart to another. Thank you. Until next time, trust your stillness. It's louder than you think.